for the launch of this booklet on Reconnecting with Böll and Irish Journey. We are privileged to be here in the Oak Room of the Mansion House, courtesy of our Lord Mayor of Dublin, Caroline Conroy, who is now going to say a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Ambassador, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to host this event in the Oak Room of the Mansion House today and to launch a special magazine by the René Foundation Ireland and the Heinrich Böll Foundation of Germany. The magazine offers us a very interesting insight into contemporary Ireland and how the country has changed radically since Heinrich Böll first visited our shores back in the 1950s. We are very pleased indeed that the son of Heinrich Böll, René, is with us today on Zoom from Berlin. Indeed, I have the privilege of hosting Jan Philipp and René at a reception here in the Mansion House on the last day of their visit here in September. It was a very much a whistle-stop tour of our country, and I only regret that they didn't get the opportunity to see more of our beautiful city. During that time, they visited the University of Limerick, the Heinrich Böll College on Achill Island, the Peace Wall in Belfast, and Queen's University, and finished up by addressing the German Committee of the Institute of International and European Affairs. The magazine reflects the diversity of locations and their contributions from experts from all of these walks of life. I do hope that this is the beginning of an increased commitment of the Heinrich Böll Foundation to the island of Ireland. As an island which has only land border between the European Union and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, we would welcome greater engagement with our European Union colleagues to deal with issues which Brexit has caused us. In my role as Lord Mayor of Dublin, I have had many meetings with political representatives and non-governmental organisations in Northern Ireland, and I recently met the Corporation North. Our peace process is now a quarter of a century old, but we should never forget that it is always a work in progress. I know my colleague and predecessor, John Gormley, as Lord Mayor, started the work by undertaking a trip organised by Corporation North to the United States with the then Lord Mayor of Belfast, Hugh Smith. Since then, there have been many twists on the road to peace, but I am convinced that with the right attitude and with the backing of the European Union, and in particular the backing of our friends in Germany, huge strides can be made, and that the challenges that now beset us can be overcome. We should always remember that the majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union, and they must never be forgotten or forsaken. I found the essay about the attitudes in Northern Ireland on the question of Brexit to be very hopeful on the one hand, and yet when one looks at the duration of the conflict, one sees a repetition of the same old stereotypes and cliches. For many young people in Northern Ireland, from both nationalist and unionist traditions, this conflict is caused by out-of-date attitudes. We must never forget that we are one island, and that this one part of our island is linked in so many ways to other parts of Europe. It's a complex and fascinating story symbolised by the chains worn by the Mayor of Dublin and Belfast. The chain I wear around my neck was given to the city by none other than King William of Orange from the Netherlands. And this is a picture of him. The first selfie, by the way. This is the man that our unionist friends celebrate every year in Northern Ireland on the 12th of July. And ironically, the chain that the Lord Mayor of Belfast wears bears the inscription Erin Gabra in the Irish language, which means Ireland forever. I hope that Jan Philipp and René enjoyed their stay here and that they will join us again. And I would like to commend both the ambassadors for their tireless work in forging closer links between both our countries. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for that wonderful
message from Jan Philipp Albrecht, who is the former Green MEP and a former Minister of Schleswig-Holstein, I think is where he was Minister, and he is now President of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and he engaged with John and Tommy on this particular recreation of the Irish journey. And hopefully the technology will actually work. And we will
Dear Lord Mayor Colin Conroy, dear Ambassador Maya Claude, dear René Böll, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to address you on this occasion in the Mansions House, where this magazine is now launched, bringing together views on Ireland and Heinrich Böll, and the exchange, of course, also between all those who are inspired by his work in Ireland and by the important impact on the German-Irish relations, as well as on the cultural and exchange of literates throughout Europe, especially, of course, through the cottage on Achill Island, the Heinrich Böll cottage, where today, in light and inspired of his work, people from across Europe are using the ability and opportunity to write and think about their work on Achill Island, which was the main purpose of our trip in September. But of course, this all has an impact on the relations not only between our foundation in Germany, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, who's acting not only in Germany but European-wide, globally, but also, of course, on the Irish-German relations, and especially the work on the exchange on German literature and on the different views in Ireland and Germany on literature and the perspectives being exchanged throughout the last decades in light of the work of Heinrich Böll, who 50 years ago now received the Nobel Prize for Literature, and that was also one of the important aspects of our travels to, of course, take that into account now and view on the work of the last decades also, which we want to further deepen and elaborate on. And I also think that it is important to see the special role Ireland has today as a very important bridge builder in Europe, together with Germany, and that this is all about also a European perspective being built very much on this heritage. And that's what I would like to also mirror. That was an important part of my travels, and I'd like to see more events like these and those which had taken place on the 30th of November, for example, held by the ambassador, and I'm happy to in time be back in Ireland on also contributing to it, and I wish you a very good launch of this magazine. I hope that you all will benefit from it, and what the different participants have written, and that this inspires more people to get engaged on those kind of exchange on the role of Heinrich Böll in Ireland, but also on the questions of today linked to the exchange between Irish and German perspectives, as well as the European exchange, which is happening in a very vivid form, of course, also in light, for example, of the situation of Northern Ireland, which is currently an important issue for all of us to take note of and to take care, as well as many other very important debates and decisions we're having right now in Europe in light of the events of the recent months and the last year. I wish you a good day. Goodbye.
Thank Jan Philipp for that, and we look forward to hearing more from both our organisations in the future together. We now have a message also from René Böll, the artist son of Heinrich Böll, who actually we had the pleasure of hosting here, I think it's almost 10 years ago now, in this very room. And he gave a very moving, especially to me, description of coming to Ireland in the 50s as a young German child. And really very moving. And I recollected some of that on reading his description in this new booklet magazine. Without more ado, we hope we can hear from him now.
Lord Major, Ambassador, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry I cannot be with you launching the book because I'm preparing an exhibition in Cologne. I'd like to thank everybody involved in this publication, editor John Gormley, Tommy Simpson, who drive us along Ireland and who accompanied us for many days, and he was very helpful. And John Gormley organized a trip for Jan and myself. All those who hosted us, especially John McHugh and the World Committee in Eckle Island. Eckle has so many memories from us. For me, I was a child of only 6 years when I came first to Eckle, a totally undestroyed landscape. There was no bombings, bombed cities, there was no war, and we were very welcome as a Catholic family from Germany. And we were very strange in that time. There was nearly no foreigners on Eckle Island. I think we were one of the first foreigners in the early 50s. And we came again for so many years, always for 4 months with my parents. And for me, very important is the memory of my parents in Eckle Island, because they were very relaxed, they were happy, and they were welcome. So Eckle has so many memories also for me as a painter. I became a painter in Eckle. I think the colors in Eckle and the light was very important for me. I would like to thank the ambassador for launching the publication and look forward to seeing you all in the near future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
René for that and reminding us that children are now in Europe suffering from being bombed again, what to think of. I'd now like to welcome to Karen Dubsky, who was, I think, born in Germany but came to Ireland as a very young child as well, and who has been a force for good in the environment here. Her energy, she is of course an academic and a marine biologist, but we all know and love her because of the force that she brings to Coastwatch, helping us protect our beautiful natural marine environment, which we really don't care for well enough, or nearly as well enough as we need to. Please, Karen.
Ambassador John Muller and Donna and everybody else, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for including me in this beautiful magazine. And it is such a privilege because many of us here even have quite a complicated past. And you're reminded of different things at different times. And you were saying with Ukraine, Today's St. Bridget's Day, and think of it. The imagination, her cloak went over the land. It went in February when it's miserable. Think of Germany at that time. Oh, that time of year, der Nebel drückt die Dächer schwer, durch die Stille rauscht das Meer. That time is totally different to going to the Canaries and getting toasted. It's when you really realize nature. And when I came to Ireland on my 10th birthday, after sending a letter to my mother with an ultimatum saying that if you don't collect me by my 10th birthday, I will go to Iceland to find you. And because I generally did what I said, she thought that was extremely worrying, and she came to collect me. Life has been up and down, and at times when I was little, when my parents as refugees were in West Germany, I know that I was being spat at and didn't say it at home. I was spat at because I was only a refugee. And it really upsets me how refugees are being treated just now. And our connections are so positive when we see the positive in people. When we came to Ireland, we saw both. We saw this wonderful help and support, particularly for my parents. And it came after people said that they didn't want another German, that there was a march to Dublin to get the land commission to buy the land which my parents had just bought. And that was turned around when my mother was advised to go to Mass every morning to a different, on Sunday, for 2 Sundays, and explain who she was and what she wanted. And when people saw her and saw her as a person, they all welcomed her. They even took it in turns to offer her a bath, because my parents came to an out farm and there was only a sort of one room which had a bit of a roof, and that's why our children stayed behind in Germany for that year while they built it up. And later we got so much support at different times, and now today is St. Bridget's Day, tomorrow is World Wetlands Day, and tomorrow we are welcoming, if anybody still feels like coming to Wexford, we're welcoming people from different communities together. We have the Ukrainian section in it. Ukraine is part of Coastwatch Europe, and our coordinator is still over there training young scouts, and there's a module there for them. I want to thank you so much for doing this, for showing that different communities can work together, and I would look forward to reading every part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And well, you've touched our hearts and also reminded us that it is the 1st of February, St. Bridget's Day. I have a devotion to St. Bridget because I was born very early in February. I'm a little snowdrop. She was a goddess. She was actually a sun goddess. I think in Germany you had a sun goddess as well, anciently. She warms the land, so she brings the light, and she warms. She takes a little candle and she blows a little bit of warmth over the land in February as we come back from the depths of winter. And bringing light and warmth to the land is our former Lord Mayor of Germany and I'm in my senior years, who has actually done the work of reconnecting with Böll, the Irish journey, after discussing it with Jan Philipp Albrecht. So I'd like you to welcome John Gormley, our former Green Environment Minister and former Lord Mayor of Dublin.
Well, thank you, Nuala, and thank you, Karen. That was beautiful. And thank you all for coming out at your during your lunchtime. Lord Mayor and Ambassador, very grateful to both of you for being here today. I know the Lord Mayor's schedule is so busy, I know that from experience. The Ambassador too, I know of his busy schedule. But the thing I'm aware of as well is that not everybody in this room knows an awful lot about Heinrich Böll. So perhaps I can just fill in and just tell you a little bit about who he is. Heinrich Böll is probably, definitely, one of the most important writers in Germany in the 20th century. And as Jan Philipp said, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature 50 years ago. But the interesting thing is that the book for which he's best known, the book that sold the most popular book by Heinrich Böll, is a book called Ilsches Tagebuch. And everybody in Germany would know this book. And the reason, it's a non-fiction book. It was written on Achill Island, and John McHugh, you're very welcome. John is here with us, who looks after the Heinrich Böll Cottage on Achill Island, which has now become famous because I think Achill will be getting a lot of tourists now because of a film, Oscar nominations for the Banshees of Inisherin. I don't know, will you welcome that or not, but anyway, there you go. You are welcome, great. But Heinrich Böll wrote this book on Achill Island. And what makes it very interesting and humorous is that he looked at the character of the Irish and he looked at the character of the Germans, and he compared and he contrasted. And I would like to read just a small passage from the book. It's translated into English, where he looked at the attitude of the Irish to the fortunes of life compared to the attitude of the Germans. And Ambassador, I'm sure you'll know this passage very well. And he talks about it, and I'll read it directly. When something happens to you in Germany, when you miss a train, break a leg, go bankrupt, we say, it couldn't be worse. Whatever happens in Germany is always the worst. With the Irish, it is almost the opposite. If you break a leg, miss a train, go bankrupt, they say, it could be worse. Instead of a leg, you might have broken your neck. What happens is never the worst. On the contrary, what's worst never happens. If your revered and beloved grandmother dies, your revered and beloved grandfather might have died too. If the farm burns down but the chickens were saved, the chickens might have been burned up too. And if they do burn up, well, what's worse is that you might have died yourself, and that didn't happen. So, in preparation for this event, I decided to see if it still applies today. I conducted a social experiment, very scientific. And so I called a German friend, someone we both know of us. And I called her and I said, how are things? And she said, could be better. And then she listed all the things that were not great, And then I said, very interesting. Böll might have a point here, he might still apply. And so then I rang. About 25 minutes later, I called an Irish friend of mine. And I asked him, I said, well, how's it going? And he said, sure, could be worse. And then I said, Böll definitely has a point. But then, to be absolutely scientific, I said, I'm going to have to ask a third person. So I was in the Dáil, I was parking my bike, I still have the privilege there, I have free parking of my bicycle. And I said to one of the Dáil ushers, I said, how's it going? And he said, no point in complaining. Who'd listen anyway? And I said to myself, now that is moving more towards the German direction. So maybe we're becoming more like the Germans. And it's clear to me that in fact that is the case. Over the years, we've seen many changes in this country. I think back to 1979 when I first went to Germany. And if you think back to 1979, you'll remember that we didn't really have wine in this country. We had Liebfraumilch. Anyone remember that? That was the only German wine that we had. We didn't really have coffee. Some people who are wealthy could get Bewley's coffee, but everyone else drank Nescafe or, I don't know, does anyone remember Ira coffee? You're definitely showing your age if you remember that one. And we didn't have motorways. Now we have too many. But what we had back then, if you recall, is we had this wonderful thing called the Nace Dual Carriageway. And everybody spoke about the Nace Dual Carriageway. In fact, I thought when I was a kid that it was so important that it was spelled J-E-W-E-L, the Dual Carriageway. Everybody used to go out and have a look at this road because it was so amazing. So a lot has changed, and why has it changed? Well, it changed because we joined what was then called the European Economic Community, the EEC, which has now become the European Union. And, you know, I have to say, one of the main reasons, and we have to say this, that we joined was because our British colleagues, they joined. It made total sense for us to join at that time. Nobody could have foreseen, I think, that they would leave the European Union. It's an incredible thing to happen, and it has caused so much chaos. And you know, I want to thank all the contributors here, but you'll notice that if you read this publication, quite a lot of space is devoted to the idea of what has happened in terms of Northern Ireland and Brexit and where we are and the attitudes. And you know, it's very, very interesting. You know, the attitudes, what has informed that, and indeed, just over the weekend, I don't know if you got a chance to look at the Irish Times where they did a poll in Northern Ireland. And I thought when you dig down, you drill down into the information there, very, very interesting to see what has actually happened and what people are thinking about. Now we hear an awful lot about, you know, a referendum, right? About a border poll, right? If you look at that, only 12 to 11% want a referendum, right? That's the priority. That's the priority issue for them. On the other hand, and this is quite incredible, 46% people in the south and 31% in the north, they actually, what do they want? Well, they want more action on climate change. So this is something that really intrigues me, and you know, I think you know, we have got an opportunity here. You know, and I've said this before. You know, we want Britain to be back for various reasons, and it's not just, you know, I'm aware that there are people in the Green Party, for instance, in Europe, and they take the view that the British caused nothing but trouble when they were in the European Union. Good riddance, close the door on the way out. Right? I don't take that view. I'm taking more of a biblical perspective, the prodigal son, welcome back in. But it isn't entirely altruistic, because there's a selfish interest here, strategic interest. We need them back. And we need them back because, if we're to be honest, the British did a lot of the heavy lifting for us in the European Union. And we were quite smart. In fact, there's a phrase in Irish, you know, Ante nach will law, he follow law, click. The man, a person who isn't big and strong, needs to be smart. And we have been quite smart, I think. In fact, I think the smartest people are always going to the Department for Foreign Affairs. We've always made sure of that. In fact, we have a diplomat, very distinguished diplomat here, and former ambassador to Germany in the audience, David O'Donoghue. And I think it's fair to say that when it came to certain issues in the European Union, like the controversial issue of tax, we were more than happy to allow the British to go out there and do the batting while we stayed quiet. So it served our purposes in so many ways, but particularly when it comes now to the question of Northern Ireland, I think it's very important that we get it back. And I should have mentioned too, by the way, that when it comes to those massive changes that have taken place, I do want to give a shout out here to Mark Henry, who contributed as well. He's the Optimist Guide to Ireland. Mark is there in the audience. You know, he shows all the changes that have occurred in Ireland since that time. But I think one of the ways that we can make a major change, and I use the analogy again of Germany. What happened in Germany? You had a divided country. You had a Berlin Wall. You had massive, security going down, this barbed wire, the whole lot, machine gun posts, the whole lot. And yet somehow, you were less divided than we are between North and South here. And this poll shows it. The poll on the weekend, again, if I can just quote you some of the things that has been said here. 80% of people that were questioned, they had no relations in the North. 70% had not been over the border, or maybe just once in the last 5 years. There's a huge gap of understanding there. And I've seen that over and over again. So we've got to do something to bring, if we're really serious about a shared Ireland, we've got to bring people together. Now, one thing I noticed in Germany, even at the height of that division, Cold War and everything else, I remember being in East Germany, and I remember one time I said, East Berlin, I said, the best way to get to know a place is just to listen to what people are saying. So I took a tram out to, I think it was Friedrichshain, I went into a pub there and I was just listening to what people were talking about. And they weren't talking about socialism, they weren't talking about Marxism. I was listening to them. They were talking about Kojak. Kojak. I don't know if you remember, Kojak was a series on television. That's what they were talking about. They were talking about, and I think that basically the idea that there were people in these police programs all the time, there were people crashing cars all the time, and they had to wait 10 years to get one car, a traffic. So this was the thing, and the fact of the matter is, and someone I'm sure has done a PhD on this, must have, the influence of television, how people, about 95% of people over in East Germany were watching Western television. It had a profound influence. It's almost as if someone said, it was almost as if many of them, even though they hadn't been across the border, were already there. And so I think one of the exciting things that we want to do this year is to look at this idea of having a community TV station for the entire country. Right? And there's a great station up there called NBTV, Northern Vision TV. In fact, I came across it, Ambassador, if you recall, there was Konrad Adenauer Stiftung organized this meeting up there, which was great. And I saw actually how engaged the ambassador was. He stayed there for 2 days taking copious notes, and saw his personal commitment to the cause. But it gave me an opportunity to see this station, and I think as part of the Shared Ireland Initiative, we can now for the first time get this station, and it can be a station devoted to environmental issues, so that we have unionists, we have nationalists talking about the issues that matter. And we've made considerable progress, but this is going to be the year, I think, that we do it. So I'm very excited about the prospect of further cooperation with the Heinrich Böll Stiftung. And also, I know that our two countries, Germany and Ireland, that we will work hard together on those important issues, the European issues, which just happen to be the same issues which are so important to us, the whole question of Brexit and so on. So with that, I want to thank the Ambassador once again. Ambassador, we're delighted that you're here, and we look forward. I think this is just the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for those exciting thoughts. I come from a northern family myself, born in Belfast. My husband has been known to call me a Brit. I think the attitude of people in the south and the north, well, as far as they're concerned, I can understand because of the violence. They used to say, oh, well, them up there, they just ate their young, we don't want anything to do with them. It's an awful, awful attitude. And let's change it. As John said, we have an island that we need to take care of together. I'd now like to very much welcome the German ambassador to Ireland, Hort Meyer-Plott. I hope I have said it right. A very distinguished diplomat who has worked all over Europe, Moscow, London, formerly ambassador to Romania, and now, I'm sure, a herald of even greater things, ambassador to Ireland.
Lord Mayor, Nuala, John, Karen, John and the friends from Achill Island, David, colleagues, a greeting in absentia to Jan Albrecht from the foundation, and René Böll, also to my dear colleague Nicholas O'Brien, with whom I work very well. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is really a true pleasure and an honor. I'm supposed to launch the brochure at the end, Reconnecting with Böll and Irish Journey in these oppressive surroundings. And John, we didn't compare notes, but my 2 cents of wisdom that I want to share with you on that issue today will turn around really these two spirits in the course of time. And believe me, one of the first things I had to learn here in Ireland is that if somebody asks you, "Hi, you," that you don't even have to say anything. You may say "grand," but certainly not, "Oh, it could be better." It's part of it. So very much with you. It is a special occasion. You can see my colleague Robert Henneberg and me, we put on our green ties for St. Bridget. The color of the green topics that we talk about today. So in that very spirit, thank you, Lord Mayor, very much for your kind hospitality on this occasion. Thank you, John, for initiating this project, editing it and putting it together. And thank you to all, Mark also, who contributed, and there are many more of us perhaps here around, to that lovely brochure. As slender as it is, it covers a wide panoply of issues linked to Heinrich Böll's life, his values, things that were important to him, and his legacy to the present, as, for example, the namesake, which he is, to the political foundation of the German Green Party's foundation, the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, for topics the Green Foundation Ireland is dealing with, or activities of the Heinrich Böll Cottage on Achill Island, to just name those examples. And let me be, Jan is not listening, but let me be boldly pragmatic right at the outset. If in our joint efforts here, we succeed in encouraging the Heinrich Böll Stiftung to enlarge and deepen their footprint on the Emerald Isle, to have at least a representative based in this country as partner and contact point, as it is the rule for our political foundations here to the Irish Green Party and government, and on all green topics of importance. Just think of the buzzword really of these days, the green hydrogen, this big future for Ireland, as I believe, biodiversity, and many more issues. There needn't be any further discussion, I think, in that case, about the relevance of Heinrich Böll for Ireland right now. But Heinrich Böll's heritage is interesting in, I believe, in yet another broader sense, and I like to focus really my remarks on that. In fact, I often use the reference to Heinrich Böll as point of departure when explaining modern Ireland to visitors. Newcomers, those who had always wanted to visit Ireland at some point and never did before, especially from Germany, those who did read at the time the Irish journal in their youth. And whenever I do that, I find that this reference to Böll's enthusiasm, his curiosity for Irish culture and tradition, which he perceived as very positive, yet almost a bit exotic, and certainly very different from what he experienced in post-World War II Germany of the 50s. This is an interesting touchstone to assess to what extent contemporary Ireland has changed in the meantime. As we know, politics is perception, first and foremost, or at least to a very large extent. And all through my career, I found it extremely interesting to watch how much images of countries, their people, or just images of the other in general may differ from reality. In principle, easy to say, there are 4 basic scenarios which one may come across and which all call for some specific reaction and action. Scenario number 1, an image is rather bad and the reality is rather poor too. This scenario, clearly a worst case scenario in which you can't do much about the image unless you drastically change the reality, or you don't shy away from recklessly selling the untruth. Scenario 2, the image is bad, but the reality is rather good, or much better. Here you have to primarily make sure that as many people as possible will be able to see for themselves what the real reality is like. Though it may still take a long time before the image as such will change. I can tell you from you mentioned my previous posting, Romania is such a case. A lovely, lovely country. I enjoyed it. And yet, compare the first reaction when you say I'm going to Ireland or I'm going to Romania with an average German. I don't have to dwell on it, but that is an example of this case. Or the other thing, a more positive thing I would like to quote, if you wondered what changed the image of Germany in the eyes of some Brits, especially British football fans, who would not have traveled to Germany too often. It was the Sommermärchen, as we called it in 2006, the World Cup, where people who had never traveled to see for themselves came back with a totally different image of Germany after partying in the streets and watching football together. Just that. Scenario 2. Scenario 3, the image is good while the reality is not that good. Here, in PR terms, you might be tempted not to do anything at all, but for changing the reality as such, continue to sail on that wave of the positive image as long as it lasts. Scenario 4, the image is good and the reality is good too. Here you should strike the iron while it is hot, and you may let yourself go, short of getting on people's nerves when boasting just too much about yourself. Now, my conclusion, and here please take it with a pinch of salt. It would be that contemporary Ireland is a little bit the case between scenario 3 and 4. And I explain myself. The reality is positive, the image too, but in the eyes of many foreign observers, it is still based on the reality of a bygone past. And that's where Böll's Irish journey comes in handy. In the art of rhetoric, the German word would be abholen, the task to meet the other at their individual, perhaps positive, if outdated image, and lead them cautiously but steadily towards a more up-to-date view of the reality, Ireland's, in this case, real reality. We need, in my view, we need that for two main reasons. One, to avoid disappointment, since idyllic Ireland of the past is no more as such, and never really wanted to be seen like that. René Böll in the brochure quite astutely refers to a dictum by Hans Magnus Enzensberger, another German writer, and I quote, "The tourist destroys what he is looking for by finding it." We could say in this case that Ireland's success of the present overshadows some charms of the past. And let's recall that Böll himself was criticized already in his time for some misconceptions and misunderstandings, as the controversy over the film Irland und seine Kinder, Children of Earth at the time it was called, I think, of 1961 demonstrated. To me, however, the second reason seems even more important. With an outdated, if even positive image, great new opportunities might be missed. At the latest, with Brexit, we talked about it already, but of course even well before, it became crystal clear that Ireland isn't just the lovely island behind the island anymore, where internal issues, politics, business interests, media, headlines, etc., can easily be handled from London or even from further afar. Now you might say, hold on, a lot has changed already in this regard, and that's true. Supply chains are being readjusted while we speak. Erasmus and Erasmus Plus study and vocational training programs are redirecting Irish students who are used to study in the UK to universities, schools in continental Europe, and vice versa, the other way around. Ireland is well in the process of becoming the English-speaking hub in the EU and Europe as a whole. And politics see EU partners in close solidarity by Ireland's side on the Northern Ireland Protocol, as Foreign Minister Baerbock's recent visit just before Christmas to Dublin so nicely demonstrated. She came to Dublin before moving on to London to talk about the same issues. So all that is true, and yet structures are still lagging behind. That is here my key message, including in our bilateral relations. Some of our traditional lead organizations in politics, economics, culture, education are still underrepresented. We talked already about the political foundations. The DAD, our academic exchange service, a fantastic organization for the time being only based in London. Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, the counterpart for IIEA, and I could continue. A good exception is the Goethe Institute, very well situated here in Dublin. But you see my point. In a pragmatic way, I think this brochure has merit in reminding us of all the aspects that cannot be seen anymore just through a London perspective, but must be dealt with here. So that's why we need Heinrich Böll Foundation, well anchored in Ireland, and many others to follow. Having said that, and I conclude, I'm not at all pessimistic. I hope I didn't appear to be. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I think the train clearly has left the station. The new trend towards a bigger footprint of Ireland in Europe and of Europe in Ireland is well established. It will no doubt continue to get stronger and stronger, and is already steadily leading to a bigger role. I can see it every day, and more responsibility for Ireland within Europe and the world at large. This is our joint European-Irish journey in a broad sense, and it is rewarding and actually quite fun to see it reflected in Heinrich Böll's own Irish journey, starting in the 50s and today being looked at again with new eyes in the 50th jubilee year of Ireland joining the European Union. What a success story. I know, Mark, you wrote about it too. We see, and what a diverse, colorful image of a new Irish reality it provides us with, especially when assessed in a warm undertone of heartfelt empathy, the one that characterizes the writings of Heinrich Böll after he and his family fell in love with the Ireland of the 50s, whose profound spirit, which is still there, he captured so well in his journal. Voila, my 2 cents of wisdom on the occasion of the launch of this lovely, lovely brochure. Thank you for including me in that, and thank you all for doing what we really like to do together to make our relations even stronger, and we will see more to come, no doubt.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very warm, heartfelt and thoughtful address and thought. Yes, we do tend to project too much an image of the Ireland of the 50s. We're not alone in that. I think the English dwell in their past a little too, but we are living in a new century. So let's go forward together. There is much to do, many, many things to do together. I'd like to thank you all for being here. I hope you can stay and chat for a little while. There may be some tea and coffee left, who knows. I'd like to thank particularly the members of the Green Foundation Ireland team. Our chair, Donna Mullins, is here. She's an expert in biodiversity. Joan is here, Eileen. It's all volunteers. We are part of the great family of Green European foundations, of which Heinrich Böll is a member as well. We are not directly funded as the German one is, because we have the English-speaking world has, as usual, a different system. So we are a charity, and we are fortunate with a little bit of funding from government via the IEN, but we do a lot of volunteering, and we do it well and happily and heartfelt, and as many other organisations, including Coast Watch, have to do. But let's not forget that this care of our environment has to become more and more mainstream, and I can only echo what John said about the community television, north and south. We have to communicate better, because people really know and are interested in their local land and communities, and we need to bring the full force of government and behind that, finally, and not just behind industry. Thank you all for being here, and please take away the leaflet, the brochure, booklet on Heinrich Böll. Please read his wonderful book, including not just the Irish Journey, but his other wonderful works. I don't read too much anymore, but many years ago I did read him, and he is a most wonderful writer and worthy. We don't actually in Ireland and in the English-speaking world generally read enough non-English literature. So just even those small steps. Years ago people didn't do it, they do it more now. We are all, and the only thing that brings human beings together, like the football analogy of the ambassador, is actually meeting people and realize we are all the same under the skin. Thank you very much for being here.